can't teach sales. And I know that's a bold statement. You can fine-tune it, you can unearth it, but you can't teach sales.
I just want to throw into the conversation here the term slippage.
How many hats do we have throughout the day in sales? We wear a multitude of different hats.
It'll take 3 times as long as you think, cost you twice as much, and you'll only do it the once. I'm Mark Edwards. This is the Channel Zone podcast. And with me today, we got Mr. Jordan Travers. Jordan, the Managing Director of Prianto Distribution in the UK. Prianto are listed in the IT Channel Oxygen's 2024 list of must-know distributors. I need to do air quotes on that one. Must-know distributors. Originally, I believe, founded in Germany in 2009, but now represented in 15 international locations. Jordan, good day. Welcome to you.
Thanks, Mark, and appreciate you having me onto the podcast this morning. It's a pleasure.
No, super. Thanks for joining us. So look, as there may be some viewers and some listeners who haven't necessarily come across Prianto in the UK before, can you do us a favour and just give us a quick overview of the business as you see it? Tell us about Prianto.
Prianto, as you mentioned, Mark, was formed in 2009 by William Geens and Oliver Roth in Germany. From there, the UK division was opened in 2011 by Yuri Pagier, who's a renowned figurehead in the industry. Prianto was formulated where there was a gap in the market for a more specialized distributor for the tier 2 software market. Mm-hmm. So there was a gap across Europe at the time, and since the establishment of the group, Prianto, as you mentioned, we're in 15 countries across Europe and North America, and the group has continued to grow. Every year we are opening up new locations and broadening the team and broadening the horizons.
Super. So we hope to see then maybe next year you'll be a little bit higher up the rankings in that must-know distributors stacked ranking chart. But anyway, it was good to see you in there. Now, help me out here. So maybe we should call this part of the conversation kind of distribution for dummies. But to help me, the term distributor, in my perspective, you see, comes from the role of what used to be logistics and distribution. That's what IT distributors once did. So that used to mean large warehouses stacked with tin or hardware or token ring cards back in the day, and software that used to be packaged in boxes with manuals in and whatever else. Now, I worked at CC in the early 90s, and in the early 90s, CC had a distribution unit. And they had a warehouse in Radlett, so this is before the move to Hatfield. And whenever I would go there, it's a kind of hive of activity, forklift trucks, men in kind of hard hats, pallets, vans and lorries coming in and out, and literally kit being collected, shipped and distributed. Now, you're an enterprise software distributor. I don't think we do too many pieces of software in boxes with disks anymore. So can you, let's say, mainly from my perspective, but perhaps for some of our listeners as well, can you help define the role of distributor? If nothing is actually distributed, how would you define distributor today?
No, and I completely get where that kind of image can come from, Mark. I think the traditional sense of distribution probably refers more to some of the much larger entities that still do shift in. And it's a term that's continued to be used across the board. Distribution of software, ultimately, I think the way we can kind of describe that today is we have vendors in the marketplace who not necessarily have the outreach to the channel partners or the teams inside those organizations to focus on that outreach into the channel. And traditionally, new vendors to market do have more of a direct focus than working with channel. How does a vendor impact that reach, and how do they grow their business working with the channel and their direct business model if they have one? Who do they turn to? So ultimately, they will look to work with a distributor if they want to expand that reach to the wider field of channel. And if we look at it from the pyramid model, vendor at the top into distribution, who can then open up the doors to the partners where the relationships are held. And And often distributors outside of the kind of the broadline distribution model tend to be more specialist in areas or
Right.
niche directions. So you might be a print disty, you might be a security disty.
Yeah.
So there's many different verticals that people can slot into.
And what
And
disty
then
are
you've got
you
your
then?
kind of
What's your is yours a specialism, or is enterprise software the category that is your
so
specialism?
our specialisms in the enterprise space fits into cloud security, hybrid working, and end user management, or workspace management, as we call it. So we do cover a broader range, but we are very much focused in that life cycle and customer journey from end to end. So from end user coming on board into the business, how do you onboard that person? How do you then supply them with the equipment that they need and manage them from day to day, right through to ongoing life cycles of that hardware and software and how that's managed. Security then plays a factor into that. Hybrid working plays a factor into that.
Gotcha.
Multiple different aspects, but we've turned that into a customer journey and a solution sell rather than being an off-the-shelf product sell.
So an intermediary between, I've said before that part of what we're trying to do here on the podcast is to look at the kind of connective tissue, if you excuse the analogy, between, the joints in the system, you could say. So the vendors, distributors, and the channel partners and resellers and so on. So although you're not shifting or distributing logistically, in some respects, you're an intermediary for knowledge, information, and relationships. You're kind of, I say, helping the vendor and helping the channel partners.
I think, and something we spoke about recently, Mark, was that distribution tend to be the team in no man's land, right? So we become an extension of the vendor. So where they don't necessarily have a channel team, distribution becomes that extension. So the vendor, what's in it for the vendor? So the vendor is able to have a sales team driving their solutions into the channel marketplace, into partners, into MSPs, into SIs, GSIs, where necessary they would have to then fund that sales activity in-house if they were going to try and do it alone. So what does distribution then bring to the table? Well, we offer marketing, sales strategy, sales skills, product knowledge, technical knowledge, and the vendor is only going to see that cost when business closes because of the margin share aspect.
Right.
What does that then give the vendor? Well, they get a sales force that's an extension of them going into the marketplace, talking to partners and engaging with them and working with them, building those relationships, the rapport, the strategy, and ultimately being that extension. What does that then look like for a partner? Because the partner then, some people might sit there and think, well, surely if you're an extension of the vendor, we're just ultimately talking to the vendor. What do we then become for the partner? As a distributor, we are then a trusted advisor. They know that they can come and talk to us about a multitude of products across the field and take advice from us and work collaboratively to identify, actually, are those solutions going to be the right fit for their market strategy? And it's building that relationship and it's joining the dots, right? And I think that's one of the big things in distribution is all around relationship management and relationship building, extending that reach and ultimately joining vendor, resellers, MSPs, making them aware of technologies that necessarily aren't in the headline news every day or in the industry news articles that we read.
There's that many products out there. It's quite shocking, really, isn't it? I mean, just trying to get
absolutely.
Any airtime or awareness of a product must be difficult. So even in this world of digital transformation, sounds very much like yours is very much a people business. So the last show we had Mark Devonshire, who I know you know. Mark's now at CrowdStrike, and he said one of the insights that he kind of dropped into the conversation. He said that the distributors are kind of the unsung heroes, often maybe resellers and vendors kind of discounting maybe what the distributor has done. I've got a question here. I'm going to break it down into three parts. So, what, if anything, could a vendor do differently or do more of to get the best from a distie? So, not necessarily we don't want to name your vendors in particular. Take it maybe in a generic sense here. But what do you think vendors could do differently that maybe they don't do now, but they could do more of to get the best out of a distie? What should a vendor do more effectively?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Mark. I'm a big advocate of change in the workplace and strategy, but
Mm.
making sure that's measured change, right? So it's not just knee-jerk reaction. And I think often, unfortunately, and this is more from my historical industry experience, vendors that we work with in the space that we're in and the level that the vendors sit at are often
Mm.
acquired quite often and frequently, and they get shifted around quite a bit. There's an example where we've seen a vendor be acquired twice through multiple mergers and acquisitions,
Yeah.
and that becomes disruptive.
The
And it's
relationship
not the
basically fragments at that point, does it? All the
it
work
does,
that's gone
yeah, and
into it.
as we know, when M&A happens, there's always personnel changes, there's always different strategy changes,
Mm.
new organizations come in, and change is fantastic because it often supports growth because that's what the VC is after.
Yeah.
I think this is a really good example because often there's a reset quite frequently or lots of strategy changes throughout the year.
Right.
And that can be quite disruptive when working with numerous partners. Some vendors are strategically working with 50, 60, 70, maybe 100 partners. Some
Yeah.
might only want to work with 10 or 15 because that's
Yeah.
their strategy. When you're working on that larger scale audience as a network, if you're constantly making change and disruption,
Right.
it's going to impact those relationships
Mm.
because there's going to be a different level of knowledge and information across the board. Number of partners will start to get fed up with it as well. So it can make life challenging.
So what would the advice
In a
be there
sense,
then, Jordan? As you say, change you say is good, but
yeah.
change poorly managed, poorly communicated, and perhaps poorly
Yeah, and I think
transitioned is an issue.
we don't see it too detrimental, but it is an ongoing
Gotcha.
strategy that we then have to realign with at the
Yeah.
distribution level
Yeah.
and then echo and repeat that into the
Okay. And then
marketplace.
specifically, what I think what you're saying then is you've kind of targeted that say the it's kind of ubiquitous kind of M&A activity, isn't it? Because again, if you look at the kind of newsletters in the channel area, it's non-stop talk about who's bought who's
Yeah.
merging, what acquisition
We're seeing more and
is
more of it,
there.
right?
More of it
Yeah.
right now than perhaps previously.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so good answer from you there. So if you then, to balance as a counterpoint to that, what should resellers perhaps, so if that was, is it any different actually? Because it might be the same answer. What should resellers do differently in terms of getting more out of or to get the best out of their distributor? Can you pinpoint anything there where resellers could work more effectively with distribution?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, right? So if we look at some of the much larger enterprise size resellers in the UK specifically,
Mm.
it's tough, right, for them because they are being pulled from pillar to post by every distie, every vendor. Everyone wants a slice of the pie, and everyone wants a foot in the door. And I kind of feel sorry for them a bit because there's certain individuals in the industry that get thrown into the wolf pit, and I could imagine it must be a challenge as a reseller to spin that many plates at once.
Right.
On the flip side of that, I think from a reseller standpoint, it's then about trust. It's building that trust with the distributor,
Mm.
right? And it's having those relationships, knowing that, okay, what they're talking to us about is truthful, it's
Mm.
factual.
Mm.
And we know that if we're going to come for advice, then the distributor is going to be open and honest with us
Mm.
and not take us down the garden path. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's been the kind of testament to my own career, but also how I like to see sales done and relationship management is transparency.
Mm.
If everybody is transparent with each other, there's less issues.
Yeah.
And
But it's
it's a much
difficult in
more
business.
enjoyable place to be.
It's a competitive business, and as I said,
It is.
But again, good insight. So, anything that what about you then? So, we said what the vendor could do differently, what the resellers might be able to do differently. Let's put the focus on distributors. What, if anything, could distributors do more of or do differently to optimize those relationships? Is there anything that you can see as a way of improving things?
Yeah, I think there's probably a million ways that there could be changes made, right? The industry is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
The strategies of partners is changing. And that's one of the challenges in distribution is we need to be aligned with the vendor's strategy, but we also need to be able to translate that into a strategy that works for the partner. So it's that being creative and understanding what changes need to be made. And I think it's constantly reevaluating the business as well, but not making so much change that it then disrupts the internal cogs of distribution at our level, and making sure that we have a happy team internally and that our staff and our employees are working to the best of their abilities, but not being constantly pulled from pillar to post.
So I'm assuming you've got a good team there then, have you, Jordan?
We do. Yeah, we have a fantastic team. It's really
good
really
culture.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really good as well is because we are a European-wide business predominantly, and we've got our North American business as well. We have a really good crossover of different cultures, different backgrounds, different country interactions. There's many monthly, quarterly, annual get-togethers, all hand calls, that sort of thing for sharing knowledge, right, internally.
Yeah,
because every market in the group is different as well.
Yes, similar but different in as much, and things that work well. All of a sudden, maybe there's an initiative, a campaign that's worked well in one country. Hey, communicated well. Maybe you can kind of replicate the successes elsewhere. So plenty of room for improvement. Interestingly, from what you said. Now then, have you ever seen the movie Glengarry Glen Ross? So Glengarry Glen Ross is a famous. It's a bit of a dark movie, actually, but Alec Baldwin, there's a classic scene that many of our listeners and viewers will know with Alec Baldwin, where they talk about the Glengarry leads. He has this kind of little bunch of, as it used to be back in the day when, because when I first went into an office, we didn't have computers. We had Bisley filing cabinets, desks, phones, and little card boxes on the desk. So it's all about the Glengarry leads. And I'd recommend, if anyone hasn't seen it, just check online for the Glengarry, Glen Ross, Alec Baldwin scene. Well worth watching. Even if I've seen it maybe 1,000 times, and I still could do watching. I'm going to watch it immediately once we finish this chat. But so with regards to leads, specifically, lead generation and deal registration, as a distributor, how do Prianto operate in that area? Do you help on the lead gen and deal registration side? If so, what do you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Mark. So traditionally as a distributor, from an integrity and trust standpoint, distribution do not go out directly to the end user base. Right. They're the resellers' customers. However, we do have some vendors that will run who are just purely channel focused, but they will run end user campaigns. And then it's about managing those leads back through the channel, identifying who the right partner is to work with on that specific lead. We might have some business intelligence that we know where that end user sits in the industry. What does Prianto do to generate leads? We've done some multiple touchpoint campaigns with partners. So ultimately creating the campaign for them, creating the assets, delivering that to them, branded up in their style and their kind of requirements. And then ultimately giving them a campaign in a box, right, is the kind of cliche term. then giving them the ability to take that to market, supporting them with that, whether that's some of the Prianto team on site with them to support with the call out day, if that's the strategy. It might be an email campaign where they generate, the reseller will generate the conversation with their customer base. We will then jump on to a meeting or go visit the customer with the partner. Because the key thing here is that Prianto, we brand ourselves as a knowledge distributor. So we don't have a portfolio of hundreds of products. We have a smaller portfolio of vendors, which gives us that knowledge in-house. So we can then support the partner in those conversations to a technical level. And they know that they can rely on what we can support them with. And then the vendor also knows that they don't need to be on every customer discussion, that it's in safe hands. And there's conversations where the vendor does need to come in because of the type of call it is, etc. But it's giving the partner the ability, and we call it kicking down the door, right? So the partner goes and kicks the door down, opens up the dialogue. We step in, do the heavy lifting, in whether that's wearing the hat that says we're with the partner, or as the distributor who's the specialist in the area.
Right.
And then ultimately the partner can go off and start talking to the next opportunity whilst we handhold that one for them.
Super. So it sounds very much in a supporting role on that kind of lead gen side. But it seems as if, I say, lead gen, sales, I think for all businesses, and maybe more so in today's current climate, because I'm sensing that there's some kind of headwinds that the industry is having to deal with here in the UK at the moment. So do you get involved in actually closing deals at any time? With the partner, do you have any involvement at the coal face in some respects?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we look at the customer journey from start to finish, depending on the technology, some of our partners have those specializations through collaboration, so we know that they can do the deal from end to end. But there are definitely examples where the reseller or partner will come to us with the customer has identified a problem that they have, or a situation that they need a solution for.
Yeah.
We'll go through that kind of consultative period with the partner initially. Then we'll have that conversation with the end user as well. So do a bit of a discovery call with them, understand what the challenges are, what the right solution might be to fit that. And then off the back of that, as the journey continues, it's supporting the partner. Look, resellers know how to sell, right? They know how to close business. So we don't need to teach them to suck eggs. It's often more what the vendor requirements are as well from that life cycle. And it's making sure that everybody has the right information at the right time so that everyone is in synchronization. And everyone understands where the deal cycle is. So it's then, we wouldn't pick the phone up and call the end user directly, because that would upset the partner ultimately. However, we would support the customer, we would support the partner with the right objection handling questions and how we can overcome those.
And you may have a bunch of collateral from the vendor, or within your own you could provide to support in helping them to kind of close that deal. You mentioned the kind of deal cycle. So let me kind of pivot across there. We say deal cycle. Predictability would be a wonderful thing if you could predict where the business is coming from. And I just want to throw into the into the conversation here the term slippage or pipeline on wheels, as I've heard it referred to elsewhere. So for those unacquainted with it, and I don't suppose there's many listeners who are unacquainted with it, slippage is where deals may be predicted to come in but slip unexpectedly. Sometimes, or should I say often, they slip at the worst possible time, at the last moment, from the disties, from the distributors' elevated, but I would also say informed perspective. So you're involved in the deal, yet you are effectively one step removed. Have you got any thoughts on what causes slippage, and if anything can actually be done?
there's a multitude of situations. I think that's what keeps being in the channel exciting, right? Because every day is different.
Well,
I
you
think
can
from a
call it
partner,
exciting. I can I
yeah,
can call it panic-inducing in some respects. But he said that constant change and evolution, it's a
yeah,
thrill. It really is. But when it comes to bringing a
absolutely,
deal in that you forecast and that everybody may be hanging on, you must have
yeah.
seen it umpteen times, and
Oh,
then all of a
100%.
sudden, for whatever reason, it slips.
And at
Um,
distribution level, we are relying on the transparency of our partners. Okay, so we are relying on them
mm,
to share updates with us, understand where the deal cycle is, what stage it's at, understanding what the next steps are.
mm,
So it's kind of, as you said, it's that one step removed. But if you have the relationships with your partners, you'll
mm,
have the transparency and you'll have the understanding of where the deal cycle is.
mm,
It
mm.
also then demonstrates internally in distribution how close are your sales team to their
Yes.
opportunities.
Yeah.
So there's always a learning from it. And when deals do slip, it's then having a kind of a recap of, okay, well, why did that slip?
Mm,
What could we do differently next time? What could we do to support the partner better?
mm, mm.
But also, is there anything that the vendor could have done to support the deal cycle?
And listen, sometimes maybe
Where did
it's
the
not.
ball
It's
drop?
it's it
Yeah,
may just be the customer's concerns and the customer's interest.
absolutely.
Ultimately,
Yeah,
the end
yeah,
user's interest have to be appreciated, and they're primary in this
yeah.
sense. It just would be
And
nice
it's
if it was predictable and slippage didn't
yes,
occur. But then
and also I think
maybe salespeopeople wouldn't get paid as much money if that was the case, because
yes,
it'd just be too easy.
but yeah, and I think also for the resell of the partner, it's always a challenge because, and look, it could be the person that needs to sign the purchase order
Oh,
is busy, and it's
please
okay.
don't
Well, how
talk
do we
about
overcome
purchase
that?
orders and people being.
Yes,
That is. I'm
bring
sure
back
I'm
some
not the only
flashbacks.
one. Isn't that what we all have to deal with all of the time? We're just, as I say, we're like, in some instances, we're like worry machines. We have to just we fret. And just to bring that purchase order in, and I'm sure you as well as I do, and many of the listeners will know that sense of relief when it appears, but it usually takes longer than expected. Interestingly, it's a bit like when I first went into business, and the accountant that I went to see, he said it'll take you twice as long and cost you twice as much money as you think to start a business, and that's a wise prediction. I've heard people say the same with regards to having a house built or having a major renovation. They say I think somebody said to me once, it'll 3, 2, 1. It'll cost you. It'll take 3 times as long as you think, cost you twice as much, and you'll only do it the once. So purchase orders, again, if there was a predictability there, and who knows, maybe with the ongoing digital transformation, maybe one day it'll occur. But interesting thoughts and observations there.
Mm.
Listen, Jordan, we're running out of time here on this. I got one last question, really. Looking ahead, any thoughts on any skills or capabilities? So you're managing director there. You've got a team of people, not only within your business, but let's say elsewhere. What do you think the skills and capabilities that are going to be highly valued in the future? What do people really need to have in terms of skills, capabilities, maybe knowledge, if they're going to succeed in distribution in particular and IT in general? What do you think they need for the future?
No, it's a really interesting remark, and we, as Prianto, are expanding in the UK and growing. We are going through a constant recruitment cycle where we're looking for new talent and to join the business. What is it that we look in? What is it that we look for within an individual? I think the biggest thing, and it's interesting, right? If I was to look back at over the years of who we've hired in the past and where their backgrounds come from, it's people skills. Okay,
Mm,
distribution is not purely because that's not the right term, but
right.
fundamentally built on
Yeah.
relationships. And if you can't have good quality relationships, but also be able to maintain those because they are long career, multitude of years that go by in this industry very quickly. Those relationships are from the moment of creation. You'll carry those relationships for your whole career.
Mm, mm, correct.
I work and talk with many people day in, day out, where when I joined the industry as an entry level account manager, who I'm now still working with and talking with today, who are also at a very or senior level within an organization. So you grow with those contacts as well, and they become your network.
Absolutely. And as a
Mm.
final note then on this, because I did mention it to you before, so you say about, long-standing relationships, people that you meet. We do have
Yep.
a point of connection between us here, which is Mr. Steve Dawes. Steve Dawes,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
believe, did some training with you guys and works with Prianto on
Yeah.
specific projects. Steve is probably the reason that I'm sitting here today talking to you, in as much as I met him in 1985 when he was a rank Xerox blue suit, white shirt, red tie BMW driving
Yeah.
salesperson. But I was a humble sales shop floor assistant in a musical instrument retailer in Swansea at the time, and it was Steve that gave me the inspiration, perhaps, and the confidence as well, to think that if he could do it, I could do it too. And literally within 6 months of meeting him, I had moved to London, and like he was with Xerox at the time, I
Mm.
ended up moving into the copier industry with a company that were called Ubix, part of Mitsubishi, the iconic business machines as they then became. But as you said, it's a people business. People buy from people. You'll have heard that phrase many, many times over. And the way you deal with people, you reap what you sow. They say long term. If you
Absolutely.
want those longer
Yeah.
term relationships, then you have to be an honest broker, I think. And
100%.
again, links back to the conversation. Mark Devonshire, who you also know,
Yeah.
he said very much it is a people business, and specifically
Yeah.
in his role in kind of channel. Perhaps it's extremely important. So, by the sounds of it,
Yeah.
it's extremely important. And I liked what you said. It's a fundamental requirement. So, people
Yeah.
skills going forwards are going to be maybe where it's
Yeah,
at.
absolutely. And I think one of the key if I won't go into too much detail, but our interview process is there's key elements that we identify. What are
All
those
right.
relationship skills like? What are those presentation skills like? And especially for the external roles where the team are going out and spending good amount of time on the road, meeting partners, going to events, and doing the right things, how are they going to react and respond to being put into an environment like that?
Mm.
And if you don't have the confidence and I think I said to you a couple of weeks ago about you can't teach sales. And I know that's a bold statement. You can fine tune it, you can unearth it, but you can't teach sales. The fun, the kind of the persona, the personality, and it's a lifelong skill set that you can nurture from any age, but obviously a lot of people start at a younger age, late teens, early 20s. Some people come into sales later on in life. But often some of the best people that we've recruited in the past have come from car sales, hospitality, and front of house roles where people are
Yes.
engaging with the public, talking to people. You look at some of the supermarket establishments that are very well renowned for their customer service skills.
Yes.
Characters that we can come across from all walks of life
Yes.
are, where they've had that front of house experience,
Yeah.
they know how they're confident to talk to people.
They can deal with people. I said it's
Yeah.
interesting you say that, because I go back to my introduction, I said, to business sales, which was Steve Dawes back in 1985. But I was working on a shop floor in a small,
Yeah.
privately owned musical instrument retailer. So I had to learn to speak to, wealthy landowner might come in and wants to buy a piano for their one of their children, and somebody else might we'd have a busker coming in who wants to buy the cheapest guitar strings that he can possibly find, as it was at the time. But you had to be able to deal with everybody
Exactly
with
that.
respect.
It's
And
persona matching as well.
Right. Understand? Yes.
Exactly what you just said there, Mark. 1 minute you're talking to a very wealthy, maybe multi-millionaire who wants to buy the grandest piano,
Yes.
to someone who maybe comes from a very different walk of life, and you as an
You need to
individual
switch
have to be able to
codes.
match exactly that. And if we look
Gotcha.
at the shelf, how many hats do we have throughout the day in sales? We wear a multitude of different hats. And also the organizations that we work with, some might be a more relaxed organization, some might be a very more tie
Yes.
suit jacket organization.
There's not many of them anymore.
No, there is, but the mentality is still there.
Brilliant.
So I think you have to be able to mirror that as well within
Yeah,
organisations.
you do. Look, that's a fantastic end to the conversation there. And as I said, I'm feeling very nostalgic at the moment. You've taken me back in time. Not that you brought it up, but I brought up my time back in 1985. But I think you made some very astute observations there. As you said, interesting. You're not really looking for technical qualifications, educational, but you need a certain amount of that. But he said that's one element to it, but perhaps the core defining feature are those kind of people skills, the communication skills, and the level of confidence. So on that note, Jordan, we'll bring it to an end there. I have a feeling maybe we'll come back maybe in the next series and continue the conversation in that light. Until then, thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm sure our audience has appreciated also your time and your insight. I say, look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Jordan, thanks ever so much for joining us. And until we see you next time, all the best.
Yeah, perfect. Cheers, Mark.
Cheers.
Take care.
All the best.
And really appreciate you having us on the show. Take care. Bye bye.